Amid news of the China-linked suspected biolab in Vegas, Florida, unveiled a new China prevention unit that will combat threats posed by the Chinese Communist Party to Florida consumers. Joining us to discuss the Chinese Communist Party's United Front strategy within the U.S. is Taylor Hathorn, visiting fellow at the Independent Women's Center for American Safety and Security. Taylor, good afternoon and happy Friday to you. So the Congressional CCP Select Committee commented on Florida's new unit, saying the CCP doesn't just target the federal government, that it also targets our states, cities, schools, and families. What is your initial reaction to this?
I think the state of Florida is really wise and very prudent in setting up this committee and setting up this oversight, because the reality is that China's playbook instructs them to get into every fabric of our society and at every level be effective. And unfortunately, they are effective in many ways. Look at some of the influence that the CCP has had just over our education system. So I think it's good that governors are paying attention. I mean, our weakest points of infrastructure in the United States when it comes to cybersecurity are really our local and our state municipalities. That is really where Chinese hackers and CCP hackers and any adversarial hackers can get into our networks and start working their way up the chain. It's a lot harder to break into the DoD network than it is a local municipality that has contracts that they work with DoD on. And so I think that the state of Florida is very wise to do this.
Okay, so you bring up the CCP's influence. The Jamestown Foundation says it will be releasing a new report that maps out how more than 2,000 CCP-linked organizations in the country and others are involved in, quote, political influence, technology transfer, transnational repression, and voter mobilization. So can you just talk to us about this web of influence the CCP uses? What is the scope?
I was talking to some friends about this last night that, if you would have said any of these things that we're saying today 5 years ago, you would have been called a conspiracy theorist because, all of this sounds just so whimsical that it feels made up like it's in a movie. But the reality is that this is reality. This is China's playbook. The segment that you had prior to this was talking about China's nuclear arsenal. I'm worried about that, but I am so much more worried about the mental warfare campaign that the CCP inflicts upon the United States and, truthfully, the rest of the world in pitting our adversaries against each other. There is a reason that there were so many Confucius Institutes across the United States, and they got outlawed because we saw a direct effect of what was happening in our universities and in our education system with having the CCP influence on our students, and it needed to stop, and I'm glad that it did.
So what is the CCP's goal here with students? What is the long-term strategy here? And talk to us about, Chinese students and scholars associations in the U.S.
So really, there are two methodologies that you can have in any kind of mental warfare. And really, this is mental warfare, right? So you've got your overt strategies and you have your covert strategies. And really what China is super good at is the covert strategies. If they were really focusing on the overt strategies, you wouldn't have Prime Minister Carney, in Canada talking about how they wanted to ally and align themselves with China moving forward with this values-based realignment that he talked about in Davos not too long ago. And so really you're looking at these covert strategies and covert tactics. So what does that look like? It looks like mental manipulation. Our society, regrettably, is incredibly susceptible to influence from the outside world. Our youth, because of their involvement on social media, on web platforms where they have access to information all around the world, are incredibly susceptible to this influence. I wrote a series of articles for Independent Women at the start of last New Year about the TikTok ban. And, several of my friends are like, man, Taylor, you need to get over it. It's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of an influence. What a lot of people didn't realize is that the algorithms for TikTok in China, students were vastly rewarded for looking up videos and watching videos and promoting their algorithms focused on engineering, education, medicine, reading, literature. They were promoted and rewarded for that, while the same algorithms in the United United States existed for United States students, they were promoted for doing TikTok dances and Tide Pod challenges, and their ratings went up for that. So that is just one example of a covert strategy that has direct effects on the mental capacity, truthfully, and on the educational abilities of our students.
Right. And I just want to add to that, the younger generation are the people that's going to eventually run this country, the United States. And that's very important as well. I also wanted to bring up today the CCP's transnational repression. So the attacks on the New York-based Shenyang Performing Arts Group, as an example. The CCP has engaged in misinformation operations using American platforms to misrepresent Shenyang publicly. And this is a company that in part exposes the human rights abuses happening in China. Can you just talk to us about the extent of influence the CCP has on our media? What are the broader implications of this, the CCP carrying out this repression in the United States?
I mean, you guys actually have a really good article or magazine piece in it that I encourage everyone to read. And if you have the link to that, I encourage your team to post it. But this is just basic gaslighting 101, right? This group exists to expose the horrors that happen inside of China, inflicted by the CCP. And what does China come out and do? They say they're CCP oriented ran so that people don't want to watch it, so that they don't want to see it. So China has no problem calling out the atrocities of the CCP, right? They just do a really good job of delineating the difference between the CCP and Beijing. They're like, that isn't us, that's them, that's this group. And it is a very typical gaslighting tactic of an adversary to make you think that things really aren't as bad as they are when they are.
Okay, so how do we stop this transnational repression by the CCP?
First and foremost, you have to call a spade a spade. You have to call it out when you see it. I wrote an article recently about the number of students that come into the United States from China to study here, and the fact that they are focusing on engineering fields, and they're focusing on AI fields, and they are getting that training in the United States and taking it back to China. Economic influence or economic espionage cases committed by Chinese nationals have gone up 1,300% in the last decade. I mean, you've got trade theft secret cases happening in the United States, 60% are which are attributed to the CCP. And so the data is there and it shows it. It shows that we are educating these students and employing these students, and they're taking what they're learning here and they're using it against us in the United States. I need to be very clear that I am not vilifying all Chinese students. I do not think that is a problem here, but we need to create a better awareness pipeline to understand where these students' allegiance are. And I think the reality is people don't understand that when many of these students come here from China, they are given a very strict out processing from China interview and an in processing interview every single time they come home to make sure that they have not been too heavily influenced by the United States. To date, there are nearly 250,000 Chinese students studying at universities inside of the United States, and we have less than 1,000 American students studying inside of China. And China has great universities too, so it makes you wonder why that tactic, why is that being implemented and not the other way around if it really was a shared partnership among education institutions.
Okay, Taylor, just final question here. Taking a step back, looking more broadly here, how do you think the U.S. government needs to treat this problem, this CCP United Front work in the United States?
I think, like I mentioned earlier, you've got to be able to call it out. I think the CCP Select Committee is doing a good job with a lot of this work. I think that, independent journalists need to be calling out these situations. I mean, the fact that the biolabs that you mentioned at the beginning of this episode, that's not the first one that this has happened in, right? Like that's happened several times under the Biden administration, and the media was complicit in covering it up. Why would they be complicit in covering it up? I really encourage everyone to look at the funding mechanisms of some of these major news networks and see where their tiebacks to the CCP are. Alex Marlow has a really, really good book about this. I believe it's called Breaking the News, and I encourage everyone to read it, that talks a lot about why the media, legacy national media, is often complicit in these things. And just like with anything, it usually follows the money. So I think people just need to be educated. And this does not mean be racist, right? This does not mean look at everything with Chinese influence and think that's bad. That is absolutely inappropriate and not the way to handle this. But you need to be able to look at the data and look at reality. Look at the FBI scorecard sheets. Look at the House Oversight Committee scorecard sheets. Look at all of these threat fact books and do your research and understand why this is an issue, why China is an issue with us. And the last thing that I want to say is I want to remind people just how heavily involved the CCP has been in the United States fentanyl crisis in the last 10 years. They have been directly supplying not only the money laundering to make sure that the cartels are able to commit major atrocities leading to hundreds of thousands of American deaths, but they're also providing the precursor chemicals to be able to make these drugs and to make this fentanyl and to be able to have the cartels transported across the border. So it's not just the covert stuff that is endangering and risking American lives, it's the overt stuff too.
And we often talk to a guest, Casey Fleming. I don't know if you've seen him on our program before, but he says the CCP is waging a hybrid unrestricted warfare on the United States. He says, and the United States has not woken up to that just yet. Okay, I think we can leave it there for this week, Taylor. Thank you so much for your comments, as always.
Thanks, Don.